Something unexpected just shook the political conversation in Canada. In a moment that many in Ottawa didn't see coming, the United States ambassador delivered a warning that instantly sent shockwaves through the Canadian capital. What started as a routine diplomatic briefing quickly turned into a headline-grabbing moment that has now sparked outrage, debate, and a wave of political reactions across the country. And at the center of it all is the response from Mark Carney, a response that critics say only added more fuel to the fire. The controversy began when the U.S. ambassador addressed growing tensions surrounding energy policy, cross-border trade, and the future of North American cooperation. During remarks that were expected to be cautious and diplomatic, the ambassador instead delivered a surprisingly direct message. According to officials present at the briefing, the United States is increasingly concerned about Canada's direction on several major economic and infrastructure decisions. The ambassador warned that policies emerging from Ottawa could have consequences not just for Canada's economy, but also for the broader partnership between the two countries. For decades, the relationship between Canada and the United States has been one of the closest in the world. The two nations share the longest undefended border on the planet, billions of dollars in trade move across that border every single day, and their energy industries are deeply intertwined. Because of that history, diplomatic messages between the two governments are usually carefully worded and delivered behind closed doors. But this time, the tone felt very different. The ambassador reportedly emphasized that the United States is watching Canada's policy choices very closely, particularly when it comes to energy infrastructure and regulatory changes that could affect cross-border investments. In Washington, there is growing interest in ensuring that North America remains competitive in the global energy market. With countries around the world competing for investment and supply chains rapidly shifting, American officials want to see stronger cooperation with Canada, not uncertainty. That is why the ambassador's warning immediately caught attention. The message suggested that if Canada continues down certain policy paths, American companies and investors could begin looking elsewhere. For a country whose economy is heavily tied to trade with the United States, even the suggestion of reduced cooperation raised alarm bells in Ottawa. Within hours, political commentators, economists, and journalists across Canada began dissecting every word of the statement. Some interpreted the message as a straightforward diplomatic concern. Others saw it as a rare public pressure tactic from Washington aimed directly at Canadian leadership. Either way, it placed the spotlight squarely on Ottawa. Then came Mark Carney's response. Carney, who has become one of the most influential voices shaping Canada's economic direction, reacted to the ambassador's remarks in a way that many did not expect. Instead of quietly addressing the concerns through diplomatic channels, Carney chose to respond publicly. In his statement, he defended Canada's policy direction and insisted that the country would not make decisions based on external pressure. He argued that Canada's economic strategy is focused on long-term stability, sustainability, and national interests. According to Carney, Canada must build an economy that works for the future, even if it means making difficult decisions today. But while supporters praised the firm stance, critics quickly accused him of escalating tensions unnecessarily. Some political figures in Ottawa said the response risked turning a manageable diplomatic concern into a public confrontation. Others argued that Canada should be careful about appearing dismissive of its closest allies' warnings. Within a matter of hours, what started as a diplomatic message had transformed into a heated national debate. And the reaction from the public was even more intense. Social media exploded with discussions about Canada's relationship with the United States, the future of energy projects, and whether Ottawa is taking the right economic path. Supporters of stronger environmental policies praised Carney for standing firm. Meanwhile, critics warned that ignoring American concerns could have serious consequences for Canadian jobs and investment. But behind all the headlines and reactions, a bigger question is beginning to emerge. Was the ambassador simply expressing concern, or was this a signal that Washington's patience is starting to wear thin? Because if that's the case, the situation could be far more serious than it first appeared. And as more details begin to surface about what was said behind closed doors, it's becoming clear that this moment might mark a turning point in the relationship between Ottawa and Washington. As the dust began to settle from the ambassador's remarks, insiders in both Washington and Ottawa started revealing more context about what may have triggered the warning in the first place. According to several analysts who follow Canada-US relations closely, the concern coming from American officials is not about a single policy decision. Instead, it appears to be part of a broader frustration that has been quietly building over time. In recent years, Canada has been navigating a complicated balancing act. On one hand, the government has been trying to position the country as a global leader in climate action and environmental policy. On the other hand, Canada remains one of the world's largest energy producers, with millions of jobs and billions of dollars tied to its oil and natural resources sector. Managing those two realities has proven to be extremely difficult. Many American companies have historically relied on Canada as a stable partner for energy supplies and investment opportunities. Cross-border pipelines, infrastructure projects, and resource development have long been part of the economic backbone connecting the two nations. But as regulations, approvals, and policy priorities shift in Ottawa, some investors have started questioning how predictable Canada's business environment really is. That uncertainty appears to be what the U.S. ambassador was hinting at. According to people familiar with the situation, American officials want clarity. They want to know whether Canada plans to continue supporting major cross-border energy infrastructure projects, or whether political and regulatory hurdles will make those investments increasingly difficult. From Washington's perspective, energy security is becoming more important than ever. Global supply chains are changing, geopolitical tensions are rising in various parts of the world, and the United States wants to ensure that its closest allies remain reliable partners. Canada, with its massive reserves and established trade routes, plays a crucial role in that strategy. But when the ambassador delivered the warning, the reaction inside Ottawa revealed just how divided Canadian leadership may be on the issue. Some policymakers believe Canada must aggressively pursue green energy transitions and gradually reduce dependence on traditional fossil fuel exports. Others argue that abandoning or restricting the country's most valuable natural resources too quickly could damage the economy. Mark Carney's response seemed to place him firmly in the camp focused on long-term transformation. He emphasized that Canada's economic future depends on innovation, clean technology, and responsible development rather than simply expanding traditional energy infrastructure. In his view, Canada must adapt to the changing global economy rather than cling to past models. However, critics quickly pointed out that such a transition cannot happen overnight. They argue that the energy sector still supports entire communities across Canada, particularly in provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan. For those regions, signals of hesitation toward large-scale energy investment raise serious concerns about jobs and economic stability. That tension is exactly why the ambassador's comments struck such a nerve. The message from Washington suggested that if Canada becomes a less attractive partner for energy development, other countries may step in to fill the gap. And in a competitive global market, losing investment opportunities can have long-lasting effects. Meanwhile, political opposition figures wasted no time using the moment to challenge Carney's stance. Several critics accused him of ignoring practical economic realities in favor of ideological priorities. They argued that Canada should be strengthening its partnership with the United States, not risking it. Supporters, however, pushed back just as strongly. They insisted that Canada cannot allow foreign pressure to dictate its domestic policy decisions. According to them, Carney's response demonstrated leadership and independence at a time when global politics are becoming increasingly unpredictable. As the debate intensified, one thing became clear: the ambassador's warning had opened a conversation that Ottawa could no longer avoid. Questions about Canada's economic direction, energy strategy, and diplomatic approach were suddenly dominating the national discussion. And as more politicians began weighing in, the situation started evolving from a diplomatic disagreement into something much larger. Because behind every statement and reaction lies a deeper question about where Canada wants to position itself in the world economy. And that question is far from settled. By the following day, the political atmosphere in Ottawa had become even more charged. News outlets across the country were running headlines about the ambassador's warning, Carney's response, and the growing debate over Canada's economic future. Analysts began pointing out that moments like this rarely happen without deeper strategic implications. Diplomatic tensions between close allies are usually handled quietly. When concerns become public, it often signals that private discussions have not produced the desired results. That possibility has led some observers to believe that the ambassador's message may have been intended to send a very clear signal, not just to the Canadian government, but also to investors, policymakers, and the public. If that interpretation is correct, then the warning was about more than immediate policy disagreements. It may have been about shaping the conversation around North America's economic direction for the next decade. The United States is currently pursuing major investments in energy, infrastructure, and manufacturing as part of its long-term economic strategy. American leaders want reliable partners who can contribute to stable supply chains and competitive markets. Canada has traditionally been one of those partners, but uncertainty about future policy directions could complicate that relationship. At the same time, Canada faces its own pressures. Global markets are shifting toward cleaner technologies, renewable energy, and new forms of innovation. Many experts believe that countries which adapt quickly to these changes will gain a major advantage in the decades ahead. From that perspective, Carney's emphasis on transformation reflects a broader vision for Canada's future. The challenge, however, lies in managing the transition without creating instability in the present. Millions of Canadians still depend on industries connected to traditional energy production. Balancing environmental goals with economic security is one of the most complicated policy challenges facing any government today. As the debate continued, some voices called for calm and renewed diplomatic dialogue. They argued that Canada and the United States have navigated disagreements before and will likely do so again. The two countries share too many economic ties and strategic interests to allow a single controversy to derail their partnership. Others warned that ignoring the ambassador's concerns could send the wrong message to international investors. In a world where capital can move quickly from one country to another, perceptions of uncertainty can influence major decisions about where companies choose to build projects and create jobs. Meanwhile, public opinion remained sharply divided. Some Canadians praised Carney for standing firm and defending national sovereignty. Others worried that his response risked damaging one of Canada's most important international relationships. For now, officials on both sides appear to be attempting to lower the temperature. Diplomatic channels remain open, and discussions about trade and energy cooperation are continuing behind the scenes. But the political ripple effects of the ambassador's warning are unlikely to disappear anytime soon. In fact, this moment may ultimately force Canada to confront some difficult questions about its future. How should the country balance economic growth with environmental responsibility? How closely should it align its policies with those of its largest trading partner? And perhaps most importantly, how can Canada maintain both independence and cooperation in an increasingly complex global landscape? Those questions will not be answered overnight. But one thing is certain, the ambassador's warning and Carney's response have ignited a debate that could shape Canada's economic and political direction for years to come. And as Ottawa continues to react, the rest of the world will be watching closely to see what happens next.